Welcome back to Side Quests, VIII, episode 10 now. Back with my perennial party member, Mr. Wes Schantz. Wes, happy Easter. Good to see you.
Happy Easter. Yes, it's good to be back. Glad we could find time today.
And just as our Christian friends would say that Christ is risen, Christos anesti in the Greek, so are we risen from the bowels of the desert, from this submerged prison that looks something like an electric drill, or three of them put together, near Dealing City, Galbadia Garden, which unfortunately we were denied access to after escaping the prison. And also this missile silo, which is where we ended our play today. And so just conceptually speaking, or reiterating where we got through today, we really, it's very similar to the Brothers Labyrinth episode, didn't cover a lot of ground. I think we did do a lot of gameplay, but we didn't get to very many different settings. So for today, we found Squall, escaped the D prison of Galbadia. Apparently we're in Galbadia, and we were apparently found without knowing that we were there, furthering our theme from the entirety of this podcast, but also from last time of being disoriented, of not knowing where we are. So in the same way that we don't know the political situation, we don't know Garden situation, we don't know our own relationship to Garden, we don't know who exactly is running the show at Galbadia. It seems like not the president, but now Idea, who has malicious motives, at least regarding Garden, as we know from the torture from Cipher, that there is some secret that the seeds at the Garden seem to possess. And and then we also didn't know how powerful we were, because she seems to have some sort of magic that makes it impossible for us to even if we defeat her in battle, she can still defeat us, possibly even kill us. One question was answered. Squall is alive, thank goodness. It would be pretty boring to move on without him in some ways. Maybe not. I don't know. He's not the most personable or charismatic protagonist to have, but we'll see. And so we get him back. We have not much of a boss battle, and I was interested in what you thought about that. So just like with Laguna not having really a boss battle, we have the boss music here and the no EXP and the AP, but it's just two regular mechanical enemies and one sort of elite forces enemy like Wedge from Biggs and Wedge.
Yeah.
Then we get outside, we split up, very meaningful, perhaps moment worth thinking about. Have to choose our new parties. Selfie is going to go to Trabia Garden, which there's a third garden, Galbadia Garden, Balam Garden, and Trabia Garden. And Trabia is where Selfie transferred from. So now we have somebody in our team from Trabia, we have somebody in our team from Galbadia, and we have multiple Balam Garden people, besides also the head of the Forest Owls, Renoa. So we have our team has become somewhat eclectic, though not really that eclectic in terms of age and other various considerations, demographic considerations of our characters. But then we each get in vehicles and go off. Squall and his team to the train station to go back to Balam Garden to warn them about an ensuing missile attack. And Selfie and her team go to infiltrate a missile base, where the missiles come from, which at the end, which you reminded me of in the pre-show, you get a devastating cinematic where the first missiles are shot at Trabia Garden, and Selfie has to watch impotently and falls to her knees and just thinks to herself, I hope that all of you that I know are okay there, and I hope it was a miss. From what we know from our future knowledge about Balam, perhaps Trabia has a chance, but also perhaps not. But yeah, so that was the basic summary I thought from this time. I'd love to hear what I missed, to hear your thoughts on things, Wes, and just get into it.
Yeah, no, I agree. There's not a lot of story per se. There's not a lot of exploration, pretty linear part of the game. But it is interesting thematically, some of the stuff that's going on here, the escape from prison, the rescue of Squall, right? If you can call it that. You know, he's apparently been let down from the cross, maybe by the Moombas, or somehow or other he's down from it, and he's regaining consciousness as your party busts in and rescues him. There's a song that plays that I found really striking and really kind of out of place in a weird way with the rest of what's been going on during this part of the game. It's a song that I think will recur a few times, but I think this is the first that we've actually heard it. Anyway, and then as you say, there's this kind of gradual discovery of the nature of the prison that we're in. Uh, it seems like maybe we can escape by going all the way to the bottom, because that would make sense, right? If we're in a tall, tall tower, the ground level is where we're going to get out. Okay, so we do that, and they open this hatch, and it's like sand kind of pours in, and I found that a really interesting moment. Um, anyway, obviously we can't escape that way, so we try the other thing, right? Go all the way back up. Sure enough, Irvine and Renoa show back up, and he confirms that is the way out. So go to the top, and the way that the prisons are kind of this yeah, this triangle connected with little catwalks becomes clear only once you're outside, and I don't really know what the point of that is, but it definitely makes for a cool escape sequence where suddenly the prison starts to descend like a drill or a screw rather, going down into the sand, and you're sort of like making your way like the hang in there kitty across the catwalk because you've practically fallen off for some strange reason. I don't know if I did this part wrong or something. I'm sort of remembering that I might have gotten a game over here when I played it the first time. Like if you don't move quickly enough, I think you can actually uh, die at that point in the game, which is a bummer because then you got to do the whole boss battle at least over again. Anyway, this time it seemed like it went okay because everything becomes all sandy, and when the smoke clears, you're at like a garage that has a couple of vehicles very conveniently. One of them's an army vehicle, and yeah, so one uh, team goes off in the regular old truck or whatever it is. The other team with Selfie goes up to the missile base, and I found it kind of cool. Like you mentioned, her backstory is at least a little bit more than the others. Like we know that she's from this other place, but we've probably have forgotten that since we first started playing because it's mentioned like a couple times. Um, so wherever Trabia Garden is, it's a third. So there's something going on with threes, you know, kinda, sorta here, uh, and and she is gonna, I guess, get a little bit more character development because she's gonna be the leader of this party. Sort of like we saw Zell get a little bit of character development just now, where he was kind of the leader of the party. He sort of knew the most because he had been uh, in ward mode and seen more of the prison. He seems to kind of handy with the crane. Um, and anyway, like Zell has had a little bit of redemption here. I think it's worth throwing that in, right? Because he's the one who kind of let the cat out of the bag, said that they're from Garden, uh, which may or may not have been a big secret. I don't know. Anyway, he felt really bad about it, right? He thought he was in the wrong, and he was kind of beating himself up about it. And now he's you know, he's got the weapons back. He led the party for a bit there. Uh, totally took out Biggs and Wedge. Definitely not going to see them again, right? Uh, and what else? Oh, and yeah, he rescues his buddy Squall. And then it's like immediately he's rescued by Squall. You know, the warden is there and Squall zips in and like yeah with the gunblade. It's awesome. It's really cool. And then Irvine saves every like so there's like this mutual saving of each other that happens that's really delightful and really makes it feel like a you know, a party. Maybe for the first time with everybody chipping in different ways. So I enjoyed it. I mean, I don't know that there's a whole lot here, and that's okay.
I agree, and it reminds me a lot of this convention of losing access to our initial playable protagonist, like we see in Final Fantasy and Final 7 and 6, right? And 6 at the beginning of the World of Ruin, so they're sort of second disc. One plays as Celeste and not as Terra. And Tara herself sort of shares time with Locke the Thief at times from what I recall about Final Fantasy VI, and of course Final Fantasy VII. When Cloud falls into the live stream and has a mental breakdown, we spend some time as Tifa, and in fact, you move through ostensibly his unconscious or subconscious as Tifa. And so, right, in those moments, I think Final Fantasy questions or raises the question to what extent the player should be, the player should identify with the protagonist. And I think this is a necessary question, not only for optimizing one's party and realizing that one needs to spread the wealth, as it were, and develop the capacities of each individual in the party. This is something that also needs to be learned. The starter will inevitably be weak against certain things, and at some point one might be denied access to this protagonist. In order to become a complete person, one has his full. I'm hoping I'm not frozen here.
I think you're unfrozen now, but I definitely missed a good little bit of what you just said.
Well,
Sorry.
hopefully it got recorded. If it didn't get recorded, we'll just have to bring it up again. But I think two things that this part of the game does effectively is helps us as the player to see that the party is our responsibility. That the party is the unit, the basic unit of the game, not the protagonist. And there may be story reasons for this, but there are almost certainly gameplay mechanic reasons for this too, right?
Yeah.
What have we just witnessed at this beginning sort of entrapped space? Prison, in some ways very similar to an educational live-in facility, where one is forced to now play with characters that one may have neglected. So my Squall is like level 21. My like Selfie and Zell are like level 11. So the game caught me in certain ways. Luckily, because of how the GFs work, magic works, the fact that you can exchange all of these between people and the abilities that they've acquired makes it so that actually these weaker characters can be stronger when the level of the enemy characters goes down because of that, because the level of enemy characters is mutable depending on what the median median level of your characters happens to be. But so I think the game may also be hinting to us that we are going to have to play in a more advanced way, that we may have to split up our team, that we're going to have to practice exchanging magic and GFs and make sure that we do that so that we don't run into trouble immediately, and so that we continue to develop as we can, and to know that there may be times when our favorite character or our best character or our strongest character is inaccessible to us. So we should be wary of over leveling or putting too much faith into any individual character. And so I wonder, because this prison really was quite a prison. We spent a good bit of time in here, probably 2 or 3 hours of gameplay in the prison, going up and down, literally going up and down, and in circles, right? So circles, always circling and then going up and down. And so some very interesting sorts of metaphors there. The way up was the way down, or the opposite way from what we expected was the way out. And so, it's sort of like which direction is freedom? Does it lay outside of you or inside of you? Very interesting question in a prison, but then also constantly circling in order to make progress, sort of an Ouroboros idea. And in fact, the very notion of a screw or a drill, right, is that it's got that sort of incomplete circle that enables it to burrow into the ground as it revolves around.
Yeah.
And so the circling of an incomplete circle creates a penetrative effect. And so perhaps that enables not only something physical to penetrate the ground, but perhaps that's how one gets to the bottom of one's self, of one's consciousness, of one's mind or one's being, in some sort of circling, repetitive way that is not exactly a perfect circle. In any case, so right. You mentioned threes. I think that's very interesting too. Obviously, we have two parties of three as well
Yeah.
as that move out. And so that, as well as the tripartite sort of prison, very interesting. Something I did want to spend a second on, just because of our sort of conspiracy theory about Irvine and whether
Mm.
he is a poor student or a planted uh, student by Galbadia, is that again his reintroduction is kind of weird. So
Yeah.
Noah, in a sort of a nepotistic fashion, has been ordered free by General Caraway, but only her. And the person sent to carry that out was Irving, and he did not think until Renoa clawed him to death to try and save everyone else. So in some ways, to me, that's even worse than him being held in Galbadia prison. And I don't understand why he's not in trouble too. Ostensibly, he was not seen when he took the shot in the same way that Squall was seen, because he was at the presidential palace. And so, even though it's so obvious to us, that may be part of the dramatic irony of the story, that he could just hide and get away.
Yeah.
Unlike Lee Harvey Oswald, if he actually did it. Just, just kidding. Though some presidential documents related to Kennedy have supposedly been recently declassified.
Yeah.
But
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
we would have heard something from various journalists if that had amounted to anything. But in any case, I think that's still very curious. Irving and Renault are still outsiders. Irving, I don't know, does his does his story add up to you, or what did you think about this moment?
I was confused initially because I forgot that Renoa had gone with the guards. So I had to kind of look back at that and be like, okay, so what is the moving piece here? She is taken by the guards when we are introduced to the mean guy guard, right? And she goes with them so that they won't beat up Zell or hurt him too badly. Um, and then we see the stuff going on with Seaford torturing Squall. Okay. Um, and then, as you say, there's this point at which she is reintroduced, coming back voluntarily, right? And it seems like she has kind of dragged Irving with her, but he hasn't been punished. Yeah, he wasn't in prison somewhere else. It sounds like he was still in the good graces of the Galbadian, uh, power structure in whatever form that might have taken. He somehow gets the mission of escorting her, and then she convinces him, maybe violently, to go back for the others. So he appears kind of at just the right time to provide some cover fire for them. Now, again, this is all kind of silly because these enemies are super duper weak. Um, so I don't know what exactly the spray of gunfire is supposed to represent here. Like, clearly our party has been spared by the powers that be. They could have killed them. They chose to imprison them. It seems like because they needed some information. Now, once they find out that we don't know anything, maybe we are as good as dead, and maybe it's a kind of shoot on sight situation now that we're making our break, our getaway. I'm not sure. Um, but it definitely seems like very contrived. Like it doesn't really stand up to a lot of careful study here that we are able to so easily get out with the help of these Moombas, with the help of these people who've broken into the prison, right? Anyway, we we can explore up and down insofar as there's doors in each of the floors, right? You go around them. You can go into some doors, you can't go into others. There's a few items. The main thing that you might spend your time doing here is playing cards, as usual, because the cards are not the only thing you can win. You also get items each time you win a card game. And some of those items are very rare. There's like a percentage attached to each one. So there's some RNG stuff you could do, I guess, to try to get the other better items at a higher clip. But most of these items are pretty worthless. I did read that there's one really interesting thing here. You can win a item called a Rosetta Stone.
Hmm.
So what it does is gives your GF the ability times 4. So instead of having 2 abilities, certain GFs allow you to have 3, and this item automatically has your GF learn the ability times 4. So you can have sort of extra, you know, uh, bonuses to magic or strength or what have you. You can have things like the encounter half or encounter none, which come in handy here to save you a bit of time so you're not fighting random battles as much, all that kind of stuff. I did not get any of those. I did not play enough card games or fiddle with the random number generator at all. So anyway, um, I think it also bears mentioning with respect to Renoa coming back to save everybody, um, that there is this theory that Squall is dead, right? You can sort of read everything that happens as a kind of dream sequence or the moment before death when all sorts of ideas are just mashing together in his head. I don't generally find those kinds of theories very persuasive, and I particularly don't think a whole lot of this one. But it did make me think, oh wait, speaking of characters who die, right? We should probably start to worry about losing one of our characters at some point,
Right,
because it's definitely a thing that these games do to take a character away temporarily, usually the protagonist, and then return them to you. But it's also definitely a thing these games do to take a character away permanently, and most often that is the main love interest. At least going off of recent history for this game. So we might start worrying that Renoa herself
right.
is going to either be turned against us in some way, sorceress-esque, right? Like we worried about Elone in Laguna Stream, or she'll be removed, whatever that looks like, killed off or disappeared or whatever. So that was something that was starting to kind of click for me as I was looking back at this and like, wait, what happened to Reno? She went off to spare her friends. She came back to rescue her friends. She's one of the best characters in combat in my book because she sort of randomly has this dog that jumps in and her limit breaks are super powerful. They can give your whole party invincibility. Um, in the final little battle here, the quote unquote boss battle, there is that unique enemy, the elite soldier, and he used this move that is called meltdown. I had to look up what it does because it did something. It does damage, but then it also reduces your defenses to 0. So that's a pretty cool. Um, I mean, like thinking about vulnerability, thinking about the ways that these characters are now starting to trust one another, right? In a way, they're letting their guards down, right? Squall has to because he's so weak. He has to be rescued by Zell of all people, and then he jumps in and saves Zell. So that's kind of evening the score. But yeah. So I don't know if any of that was resonating with what you're talking about with Irving per se, but I was definitely thinking a lot about Squall and Renoa here in this
Well, I
book.
think it certainly resonates with what I was saying that may have been lost to the abyss as
Okay.
Zach stole my initial thoughts. But I was saying that the first thing that was resonating with me was the fact that Squall, who wants so much agency in his own life that he so much agency that he doesn't even want to be talked about in certain ways. So to be dead to him is a utter passivity, sort of like with the Achilles in the Iliad, right? It's there's nothing more you can do to add to your team A or Kleos once you're dead, to your honor and glory. And so, but in this instance, he's tortured by his enemy, saved by these strange Moombas who call him Laguna, further disorienting, saved by Zell, saved by Irving, gets a chance to square with Zell, perhaps squares with Irving, sees Renoa again. Renoa has also helped her because she enlisted the help of Irving, and he's the only one that uses a projectile weapon like Laguna and thus can give them cover fire. Interesting sorts of, that's the thing about an RPG, right? Like you don't know what the status of bullets are. Though in an actual battle sequence, somebody can be shooting at you, and that only takes so much damage. Outside of the battle sequence, bullets might be able to kill you. I think particularly about Zack in Final Fantasy VII. And
Right.
eventually he gets taken down by a number of soldiers from Shinra who are wielding guns. So enough guns can take down these characters.
Gotcha.
To your point about what Final Fantasy often does to main characters, particularly love interests, I think again about the immediate precursors, Final Fantasy VII and VI. Obviously, 7, spoiler alert, very painfully takes our love interest Aerith away from us, who is herself something of a mage. She is from this race of ancient creatures called the Ancients, and has a strange sort of naturalistic connection to materia and to things that can grow, like her mother, and also to holy magic. Final Fantasy VI, a very similar sort of conceit. There's Terra, who is actually the protagonist, who it turns out is a half of a GF, an Esper summon. And so she also is half of some sort of semi-divine creature, and thus has this magical propensity. And she disappears for a while. But interestingly, the character that can fully disappear is Shadow.
Oh, yeah.
Shadow, if on the floating continent, you don't wait for the last 5 seconds for him to run behind you. If you don't have faith that he's going to follow you, and you don't wait till the very last second for him, you lose him forever.
Yes.
And he too is a character that leaves you periodically and randomly, even prior to all of that. And so you're totally right that we need now to be afraid. And Cypher, I don't think counts. That one of these characters that we're building relationships with, relationships of reciprocity and of saving, and people with whom we are building unconscious bonds, right? Bonds that strengthen relationships, regardless of the things you say to each other. Zell saving Squall, throwing him his sword, and then being saved by Squall. There's something deep forged in those moments between these two individuals. They can rely on each other. They can trust each other. Squall now can trust Zell in a way he never could have trusted Seifer, for example. And Renoa proves herself, as well as Irving to some extent. There's still questions about him. So, right, I agree with you that the game, besides introducing new mechanics like having 2 different teams and alerting us to the fact that we may not have access to every character all the time, so we better balance our efforts in terms of developing them, and also get comfortable with exchanging magic and also GFs, and not just think about an individual, but think about a party as a fundamental unit. But that it may also be preparing the hammer to hit our hearts by developing these unconscious connections between the characters that make them really care about each other. And then after not only mechanically spending time in sort of an economic way developing our characters, but over this time also developing into or sort of relational connections to these characters, that would be it would be a good time then to kind of break our hearts by killing one of these characters that we then put a bunch of time into, as well as seeing our that's funny, our protagonist Squall finally develop a relationship to, especially having seen how far he's come, right? He didn't want any of these relationships, in the same way he says he doesn't want to be a leader still. And so his desire to push them away, and their ability, like the waves of the opening CGI, to just continually push back against him, shows us just how far that he already has come as an individual. And it would be, I think, tragic to see that that process of Bildungsroman that we've been observing, that is, very much unconscious and not just being led by him. It's not him that wants all these people in his life, and yet they are a part of his life, and more a part of his life. And more important, to his life at this moment. It would, I think it would be tragic to see someone like Renoa die. I would also add that insofar as there is some connection between her and this class of sorceresses, she is very much in line with these most recent protagonists and love interests, Aerith and Terra, in having something special about her, not only in terms of the subjective perspective of Locke or Cloud, but also in that there is some access to some sort of magic that requires something beyond what can be given within the scope of the game.
Right.
Two are half some super race, and we don't yet know the mechanic that governs what makes one a sorceress, but we've run across one so far, and she handled us pretty easily.
Right. Right. And let us live
And
for her
let's
own reasons, which we don't fully understand. Yeah. And I think it's worth pointing out here, like the nature of Squall's coming to consciousness involves also these little animal-like creatures that can talk a little bit, telling him that he is Laguna. You know,
right.
so he's like sort of cottoning onto the connection between himself and Laguna little by little. It's been teased that maybe Laguna is his father, maybe not. It's, you know, there's something going on. He's Laguna's almost Renoa's father, but not quite. You know, so yeah, so there's something interesting about like the sort of accepting of this other dream person who turns out to be real, right? And turns out to be important for Squall's own existence that's involved here. And Squall, you know, taking that, accepting that, not like freaking out, at least if he hasn't fully processed it, which he hasn't had time to. But that does seem like an important thing. And I do think it's connected with this song that plays, right? So I do still want to talk about that for just a second. It's like
The
in
eyes
all this, in
synth.
all this, this prison music, right? This like exciting escape the prison music is happening, and this battle music and this and that. But then there's like this totally other mood that comes in when the song plays, right? It's very soothing. It's very melodic. Um, it has this quality of lightness and light and kind of like almost quasi holiness
Mm.
feeling to it, um, which I take to be a kind of musical expression of him finally letting down those barriers, finally connecting with these people, trusting them, accepting that he is their leader. You know, he's going to have to be their leader, and they make him make the choice, right? Who's going where? Squall, you have to choose. They almost like say it too many times. It's like, okay, I'll just choose. Whatever, it doesn't matter. All of you are interchangeable. We just switch GFs from one to the other, and you're basically the same, you know, for all the intents and purposes. But I chose anyway to have the three people most closely related to Balam Garden go to Balam. So
I
so I had
did too.
Quistis, Zell, and Squall go to Balam, and then the other three, right, the Galbadians slash Trabians go up to the missile site, because who knows, maybe Renoa being the daughter of a general will come in handy, and Irvine apparently being sort of part of their army kind of might be useful as well. So yeah, that's kind of
So the
fun.
song that you're mentioning, correct me if I'm wrong, it comes on when Renoa shows back up with Irving in a moment of necessity. Zell is saying, you know, it's a what do they call it? A Mexican standoff, as
Yeah.
it just they're all crouching down under cover, bullets flying past them, and Zell's like, "What are we going to do?" And then Irving shows up, and
Well,
so sorry, with
it, they well, and then she kicks him down the stairs, right? He's like trying to stride in all cool, and she just like boots him, and he tumbles down. It's great. No, it's actually before. It's when they walk in. I think the song starts playing when they walk in to get Squall down from the torture chamber. He's already down. He's already kind of coming back to himself.
yes, okay.
And that's when it plays. Yeah, yeah.
Right. And so, okay, the first time obviously we heard this song was Laguna and Julia, and this Julia song. And so there's
No,
all
separate. It might have a similar uh, melody or something to it. Um, but it's not Eyes on Me. It's a different. It's called The Oath. I'll put a link to it in the
Okay,
the thread
because
here.
we we experienced a little bit of difference in terminology talking about the sorceress's song too, but it turns out those are the same. This isn't maybe the traditional eyes on me, but we do get eyes on me
Okay.
during
When
this.
Renault comes in. Oh, interesting. I didn't catch that.
There's a little synthesizer piece that comes on, and then it does have the dun 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 dun. So it's not the eyes
The
on
full
me,
version.
will
Okay.
let forget, but that riff, those series of notes are part of it.
Okay.
And so in the same way that the sorceress is succession or procession, I get that wrong, is also the same as liberare fatale. I think
Gotcha.
there are differences between those, but they're basically the same songs. They have the same melodies within them. So, okay, and we can figure out, and I can figure out whether I'm wrong about that, but I'm pretty sure because I occasionally just leave the system on for a good bit of time while I do something else, that I did hear Eyes on Me being played.
Hmm.
And so, and I thought that that was the first time I had heard that, not with Laguna. And so maybe we can try and confirm this for next time, because if that is a song that played from the dream world, sung originally by Julia for Laguna, that we then hear more about in this most recent Laguna dream when Rain is describing the situation, then there are further connections between the dream world and
Cool.
this real world, and there are further connections between what was happening between Laguna and Julia, and all of a sudden Renoa and Squall. And so
Okay.
so that's what I thought I saw developing when she returns and Squall sees her. That, like you said about meltdown, this is
Uh-huh.
this is a moment when it's as if his defenses have been have been compromised, and he feels a moment of real connection to someone, somebody who wanted to come find him and to come save him and tried to and was partially successful at doing it. It's a very meaningful moment, and I think the change of music there indicates what you were saying about meltdown, and also partially what you were saying about the change of music and momentum itself, that even in the midst of this prison and this time of disorientation and this time of many questions about what is going to happen in the future, Galbadia, your own Balam Garden, God, you hope not the same thing as we saw happen to Trabia Garden and poor Sid and all of those people there. But in the midst of all of this, in medias res, there can be personal connection made, and I don't know. I think that to some extent says something about life, right? We don't get a lot of time. And people ask what the meaning of it is. And there's all this stuff going on. There are various wars, there are always plagues, starvation, terrible things happening. And yet, in the midst of all of this and all this time and all these people and all these things happening, people still make connections with each other. And they seem to think that these are among the most meaningful things in their lives
Hmm.
as well, right? Almost as if a connection with another person is even more random and less statistically probable than even coming to be alive in the first place. That you should meet some other living thing and then connect with it,
Yeah.
even less probable, right? Um,
Dude, there's a wonderful part here about improbableness, right? Yeah, I agree. The series of rescues, of saving each other's lives becomes almost like silly, right? Um, I definitely feel like the sense of time is represented by the sand as well, right? The sand's pouring in at the bottom of this thing, where you think you're going to find an escape, there's just more sand, right? And so it's almost like a kind of hourglass image, is what I was getting from that, right? It's like this inevitable gravity, this inevitable being pulled down, this inevitable downwardness, and despair. Um, but then it's also kind of comical, like how much salvation is popping up everywhere throughout this sequence. There's the coming down from the cross, and then of course Squall is the savior of Zell, and then Irving is the savior of all of them, and then Renoa kicks him down the stairs, and it sort of like undercuts the seriousness. And and when they get in the cars, after Squall has like miraculously been saved somehow from the thing going into the underground, so then we're just in the garage, and we pop in our cars and there's no more threat. Um, it's not really explained why, but we're safe. And then nobody wants to get in the car together um, with Irving, right? He's doing this thing again where he's like he wants to be with the girls because that's like his persona or whatever. But it ends up being like all the girls get in one car and then the boys jump in the other one. And then yeah, when they finally do get to that kind of crossroads, it's like Selfie's moment. She's the one sort of taking charge. Um, it is really sad, but also sort of there's a kind of like quietness to seeing the missiles launch. It's not like a big explosion or anything. They just sort of they're in the distance. Um, and there's this big question, right? Like, what are the odds? And that's Selfie's whole thing with her limit break, right? Like it's a kind of
Uh,
slot machine, right? So maybe there's a miss, she thinks, and maybe she is lucky. Maybe her luck stat is high enough. Who knows? Anyway, but there's this quote that I think is pretty important here, where Squall again showing some awareness. This mission is unlike any other. It's not an order or a request from anyone, right? This is a moment when he has chosen the parties and he's deferring to Selfie. Her leadership is going to be taking one of the parties off in a totally different direction, right? Because she cares about that. And his party, they're going back to like save people again in Garden, which is not directly related with any of their assigned missions at the moment. So it's a pretty cool kind of like we're going to try this other path, right? We're not just going to do the thing where they tell me what to do and I do it because I'm just good at my job. I don't care, you know. He does care, and Selfie clearly does. Um, so
that's
there's freedom in that.
that's fascinating. You're really making me think a lot of things that, well, so Squall is getting more points towards Hero of Time now, right? Or the fact that this is not a mission given by an organization, but from his own sense of conscience and morality. That shows growth, and that shows a greater calling, right? This is not for money, this is not for rank, this is for something ostensibly more important. And so he's stepping into the role in some ways that Seifer wants to step into, that of more of a knightly role, one who serves the realm, as it were, rather than some sort of considered interest. What you say about the sands and the desert is very strong to me. I would also add that that's a place of transformation historically,
Sure.
that the early church fathers would go out into the desert. There's obviously a biblical and New Testament and Old Testament, or a Hebrew Testament and New. You know, the people of Moses spent 40 years in the desert transforming from I suppose Egyptian slaves into autonomous people, or something like that. And also Jesus spent some time being tempted in the desert, Easter, but also the early church fathers were known for doing that. And so there's, like in the Magic Mountain, where a place at the top of a Swiss mountain is covered in snow and there's a sense of timelessness. Very similar in a desert. And we both lived in deserts, obviously, you in Phoenix and me in San Diego. We know about the sort of timelessness of a desert. That the season doesn't really change in San Diego. Occasionally it's cloudier, and with the June gloom, as it were, in the May gray. But right, there's an infinitude to sand, which makes it an ironic thing to put in an hourglass, which is a representation of finitude. Well, perhaps there's an eternal amount of time, but you only have so much time.
Right.
And so sand and a desert, and the fact that Squall starts in a desert, in a place that, in a thing that literally penetrates down into it, makes one think about sort of the Jungian night sea journey of Hercules, where he's in like a box in the ocean. So an enclosed place in a giant space that one can't escape under. It's a symbol of transformation, because there are two sort of perfect constraints on one that make one have to change into something new. Well, it's the same here. It's a desert. That alone is insuperable. But to be within an enclosed thing buried in the desert, Squall is going to have to become much more, and the team is going to have to become much more in order to transform into the thing necessary to escape from this situation. And so I think we really do, as players, experience a sense of being trapped because, geez, it takes a long time to get out there. But that's because our gameplay style and our appreciation of these characters also, I think, needs to transform from our disc one sort of set of skills and beliefs about the nature of the game and the characters' relationships to each other to this two more developed place. I would also mention that there are again strong correlates in the more recent predecessors of deserts. Final Fantasy VII very famously has the golden saucer and the desert, and then of course Ruby Weapon, who himself looks a little like this prison, has those claws that dig into the ground.
Yeah.
And is also himself sort of a symbol of despair because it is almost impossible to beat Ruby Weapon, and especially if you don't know how, right? You have to show up with two characters knocked out so that they don't get blown away. And there are all sorts of things that you have to have ribbons on each character so they don't get afflicted with terrible status effects and ribbons themselves take a lot of play at the golden saucer in order to get. But then also in Final Fantasy VI, I will need your help with this, but isn't it Edgar's kingdom that is in the desert, and can't it itself dig into the ground when under threat? Right. And so I think we see some building not only of relationships in Final Fantasy VIII, but on themes that we've seen in its initial predecessors, and even looking into the geography of them, that there are things that are hidden beneath the surface in both Final Fantasy VII and Final Fantasy VI that need to be found. And so there's also something, I think, which you pointed out very valuably this time. There's something deep and emotional and psychological and something between Squall and his friends that was hidden beneath the surface, that was the treasure beneath the surface in this game. I know that you've had some Easter egg hunts today, themselves representation of finding that thing of tremendous value out in a place that seems like an infinite space of nothingness. And yet there was something there. And at least in the case of Squall, it's not something that would just naturally be there either. It's more that the sand is the scene necessary for what happens, but certainly not the sufficient. Squall needs his friends there, and he also needs a conflict too to bring out the best in them so that they connect so close together. But yes, I think that's brilliant. Seeing sands and sands of time, the sense of the infinitude and also of the finitude of certain things too, like the sand castle. But also seeing it as a space of potential transformation, like the anchorites and Jesus and Moses and the Jews after escaping Egypt, too, and also connecting that to the predecessors, which feature deserts as well.
I really like the connection with the moving technology in the desert. That's a definite motif here. We don't quite know what the point of these giant screw things is, but it definitely makes that idea of like digging down, that harkening back to previous games is pretty interesting there. The kinds of stuff you can find there, like I mentioned, you can win items from the card players. You can draw some hidden things, like there's a Blizzaga that's hidden, like there was a Curaga that was hidden back in the dream with Laguna. So there's something interesting going on there where we're accessing those levels of magic that the sorceress was using in the battle against us. We can also find, like at the very bottom of the last cell is a Combat King magazine. So again, this thing about like finding written texts within the game. There's a bunch of different ones, and I think this is the first of the Combat King editions that we found. It's basically a way for Zell to learn new limit break moves, and the one that is in this magazine is the Dolphin attack. And so again, it's connecting him with previous characters who have that sort of limit break. Tifa has a Dolphin attack as well. It's a kind of a cool playful thing. It's not necessary in any way, but it definitely adds a little bit to that notion um, of the site of transformation, right? The dolphin being this mythologically salvific figure for sailors, right? There's stories of the dolphins saving people. Also, of course, a very social animal, a creature of the deep, and yet also one of our closest animal analogs in a way, right? It's very intelligent, has communication, has play, has you know um, a biological closeness to us as a mammal. And so there's a lot. I don't know. You could read into that, I guess. Um, I just think the limit breaks in this game are so extraordinarily powerful. It's kind of absurd. It's the only thing that really induces you to have a lot of like um, you know, worry about your characters. Because if you leave them at a low HP, they keep getting limit breaks, so you're winning battles quickly. On the other hand, they're at low HP and they can get knocked out, even though you're like way absurdly overpowered compared to the enemies you're fighting if you're doing stuff with your junctions and all that. So I don't know. In the battle, like to get out of here, there's this missile attack that like halves your HP each time. And like I think you said you played Diabolos, right? And so he also uses a demi attack that takes a chunk of your HP each time, but doesn't kill you, right? So it sort of like gets you into that limit break zone, and you're pretty safe there. You're relatively stable once you reach that low enough HP to do things like the slot or the Augustine. I call him Augustine. I don't know if that's his name. Angelo, right? That's his
Well,
name. The cannon,
Angelo
right?
can.
The Angelo cannon or the moon thing that makes you invincible. What other ones? Right. So like Irving and Squall and Zell all have like a multiple attack thing they can do in different forms, and it's just like overpowered. Um, but to get to that state, you have to be vulnerable, right? It comes back to that again. You can choose to. I shouldn't say you have to, but you can choose to play the game in such a way that your characters are in danger, sort of, but in a way that lets you win battles way faster. So, uh, all that to say, yeah, we're in the desert. There's going to be some interesting, uh, you know, divergences here where one team hops on the train and goes back to garden, presumably, but we cut immediately to Selfie, so we're going to do her part first. So I found that kind of interesting that the focus is very much on her now.
You're right about vulnerability. I mean, all of these characters are finding themselves in very vulnerable points right now, right? Renoa, part of the Galbadian um, nation that has just had their president murdered and been taken over by a sorceress and her father, whom she ostensibly loves, even though she's on different side of the fence from him. What has to wonder about him? You know, he's still working to save her and has in multiple ways throughout the game so far. But apparently, he needs to see her as more of an adult and less of a child. But so she's got things on her mind. Selfie, obviously, I mean, and this is something I meant to mention, but just the um Hannah Arendt calls it what the mundaneness of evil, but
Banality.
the banality of evil. And so
Yeah.
just seeing this, just the banality of failure is what I see here. All of this that we've done, and no matter how fast we get through the prison, we're just a little bit too late. There's nothing
Yeah.
we could have done. We get out there, and then the missiles are gone.
Yeah.
And I recently ran a race where I didn't run as fast as I wanted to, and it's like, well, when you fail, you just finish and it's done, and
Mm-hmm.
you failed. And to some extent, that's how failure feels. That the time passes, but that sense of achievement or completion that you were aiming at, and that would have accompanied that moment in time had you achieved it, is not there. There's a sense of absence. And that sense of absence can itself create its own emotion. So I'm a little bit, upset about not performing, and going to change some things to make sure that I perform better next time. But when the rockets just shoot, there's just again a sense of total passivity, of lack of agency, that there was nothing we could do. In the same way
Yeah.
that Idea strikes Squall right through the heart with a sort of Blizzaga spell. time just goes on, and this terrible thing just happens. And so that's part of the world that Selphie inhabits, that her home can just be destroyed. And that's something that we need to understand about it. But so she's feeling pretty vulnerable. Irving, I'm not sure where he's at. He puts on a big persona front, but we know has a lot of insecurities. But then the three Balam Garden individuals, they're running home to try and save it from a missile strike that will destroy it entirely and everybody they know. They are also in a very emotionally vulnerable place. They really care about the outcome of this. So I think I see in each of the characters, but particularly in Selphie and the Balam Garden characters, a recognition of their vulnerability, of how much they care, of how much they have to lose in this game. And now the fact that they're not just looking for rank or money or political freedom, as important as all of these things are, these are all very important things. These are the things that matter most to them. Their home and the actual physical space and the people that make it up. And they just watched Selphie lose this potentially, even though she's making a new home at Balam Garden and is transferred. And to some extent, this just brings the stakes home. And having the stakes brought home, this enriches the characters and makes it easier for me as a player to embody them, or to empathize with them, to really feel the weight of what they're carrying, and thus to connect to them.
Yeah. Well, and feeling like the time you're putting into this game is time well spent, right? It's important that connection should happen.
Yes. Yeah, no, it was tough in the fire cavern early on to know that this sort of thing would be happening, but the magic, the transformation, the alchemy is showing up, as it were.
Yeah.
Well, so my friend, we got out of prison. We've made it into the second disc. We need to hopefully save our home, Balam Garden. And so I wish you luck in doing that. And we'll have to hash it out, but I think we might be meeting, if possible, earlier this week coming up, just because this weekend will be a little bit tougher, but then that'll be good for our listeners if we can make that happen.
Yeah, we can find some time, I think.
If we can. Yeah, just have to turn the hourglass over and see what's there.
Cool. Yeah, so maybe getting through the missile sequence as much as possible by next time. Sounds good.
Yeah, that sounds good to me.
Cool.
And I think we announced this to everybody, but just to reiterate it to everybody, congratulations to you on being accepted to this conference where we're going to be talking about electronic game narratives.
Yes, likewise. So you're the one who told me about this conference, and you are ahead of me on the other thing too, because I haven't even reached out to them yet. I got to get some of your verbiage for the email to the humanities thing. But the conference, I gotta reply to them and confirm. But yeah, that should be really fun. That's coming up pretty quick here in June.
Yes, games in the occult and such. I think you originally brought it up, and then we mentioned that we were both applying to it, and then we both got in, which is awesome. And I think you're going to be zooming into there. I may very well be zooming into there, but I'm thinking about how I can make it happen. We'll see.
Cool.
But it's in Manchester, in the United Kingdom, and so yeah, we'll see what we can do. But congratulations to you, and I'm very pleased myself, and I'm looking forward to getting to talk to some other like-minded individuals.
Yeah, right on.
All right, well, until next time, my friend.
See ya.
Save point saved.